Hello, everyone. It is Tara C. And I thought today, you can see some of my crochet, um, that I would read from Mountains of Spices, chapter 9. As you know, Much Afraid was a part of, and still is, a part of the Fearing clan. And the head of the family, the patriarch, is old Lord Fearing. And it was his decree that she marry her cousin, Craven Fear. But she was saved by the chief shepherd and went to the high places and got her hinds feet. And now her name is Grace and Glory, no longer Much Afraid. And she has returned to the valley. So this is chapter 9 of Mountains of Spices by Hannah Hernard. So here we go. I love this chapter. Chapter 9, Death of Old Lord Fearing. Old Lord Fearing, the head of the Fearing clan, lay on a sick bed and was not expected to recover. The news spread all over the Valley of Humiliation, and there was much talk and conjecture. It must be confessed at once that the news caused no very great sorrow. In his own home, the old man had been a tyrant to family and servants alike, a despot over his numerous tenants, a miserly, grasping landlord, hard-hearted and without pity toward those who were in distress or unable to pay their rent. That he was very rich, nobody ever doubted. That nobody else ever got any good enjoyment out of his wealth was equally apparent, and there was nothing to indicate that he did either. For a number of years he had been a widower. All his sons had left the parental roof and his tyrannous control as soon as possible, and his daughters, with the most eager alacrity, had also married and taken their departure. He lived, therefore, in the old family residence, half manor house and half castle, dependent for his comfort on a housekeeper and a host of surly servants. It was not to be supposed, after a lifetime of unbroken self indulgence and tyranny toward others, that now, when the time at last had arrived for him to take his departure out of this world and to leave his castle and his wealth behind him, that the old man should face the inevitable, either with calmness, courage, or peace. From the moment that the awful realization broke upon him that the time which he had dreaded all his life had now arrived, and that here he was, actually lying upon his deathbed, never again to leave the great, gloomy bedroom until he was carried out in a coffin. From that moment, he became the prey of the most harrowing and tormenting fears, and there was not one single loving heart among all his hired servants to minister to him with love and compassion, or to soothe and comfort his fears. It is true that his two elder sons and his married daughters had been informed of his illness and of the fact that recovery was not expected, and they had traveled to the castle, not in order to surround him with loving attention, but to be present dutifully at the last ceremonies and to accompany his body to the grave, and, in the case of the eldest son, to step with dignity into the father's shoes. The old man was only too well aware of these facts, and they added to his agony. One son was absent, for he had fled from the place years before to become a prodigal in some far country, afraid to return to his home, cast out and disowned by his father, who refused to allow his name to be mentioned in his presence, and had torn up, unopened, the few letters the lad had written. There had been rumors that his youngest son had repented and sought out the people whom he had wronged and was seeking to make restitution as lay in his power. But nobody had ever bothered to try to discover the facts of the case. And as all the letters he had written had been destroyed, for his father absolutely refused to forgive him, no one no one knew of his address or in what distant land he lived, so that naturally no news of his father's illness had been sent to him. So the old lord lay on his bed, surrounded day and night by nurses and attended by the most skillful doctors money could procure, anticipating death with an agony of horror impossible to describe. His fears were so great that the doctors had once suggested the advisability of calling in the help of a minister who might be able to give him spiritual comfort, or perhaps a priest to allow the old man to ease his conscience by confessing his sins. But Lord Fearing had been an infidel for so many years that the very first suggestion of such a thing threw him into so great a rage that nobody ventured to make the suggestion again. The tormenting days and the still more terrible nights dragged slowly by, and the old man grew weaker. He had steadily refused to see any visitors. He knew only too well that his own cronies would despise his agonizing fears and would not know what to say to him, and the sight of their health and strength and preoccupation with the things of this world, which he must so soon leave, would madden him and aggravate his own horrible fate. How they would jibe and joke about his fears among themselves afterwards. The shepherd's friends had made many earnest attempts to see him. Mrs. Valiant, who, before her marriage, had been a nursemaid at the castle, was one of them. So was Mercy, who would have been only too happy to share in the nursing. So was the young shepherd, Fearless Trust, who was foster brother to Lord Fearing's youngest son. But all in vain. The old man, in his fear, and in his fear of others seeing his fear, was adamant. Then, one afternoon, the nurse was called out of the sick room and returned to tell the old lord that a young woman very specially requested to be allowed to visit his lordship. It seemed that she was a relative of his own. Her name, when his lordship had known her, had been Much Afraid. But it seemed that she had now changed her name and was no longer a Fearing. She had been absent from the valley for some time, but had recently returned and seemed most particularly anxious to see his lordship once again. Much afraid, muttered the old man, tossing restlessly on his bed. The name seemed to stir some kind of echo in his memory. Much afraid. Then after a moment he muttered, Why, that was the name of the girl who refused to marry that vagabond. Craven Fear, the brother of my daughter-in-law, Gloomy. Let me see. Didn't she go on some kind of fantastic journey? Yeah, that was it. She went to the mountains with that mad fanatic, they call the shepherd. And that young fool, Pride, went after her to try and bring her back, and it is said the shepherd hurled him into the sea. Some of the others went too to kidnap her, but they failed. So she got to the mountains after all, did she? I wonder what happened to her. His curiosity was awakened, and after a moment or two of muttering to himself, he said to the nurse, "So she's back again, is she?" "Yes, my lord." "And says she isn't fearing any longer? What do you say she calls herself now?" "Grace and Glory, my lord." "No longer fearing," muttered the old man. "Grace and Glory. I wonder what happened to her. What did the shepherd do to her?" At last, spurt of curiosity came over him. He'd see for himself what she was like. This one time much afraid fearing, who had eluded the whole gang who went after him, wasn't a fearing any longer. "Tell a young woman she may come in," he growled out at last. And in a moment or two Grace and Glory entered the room, followed by her two handmaidens. "Yeah, who are these two, eh?" growled the old man testily. "I only agreed to see one. Which of you is my relative much afraid, or Grace and Glory, or whatever you call yourself now?" "I am," said Grace and Glory smilingly, "and these are my two handmaidens, Joy and Peace. They go wherever I go." Then she stepped quietly forward and stood beside his bed. The old man and the woman who had been to the high places looked at one another in silence. "What's this?" he burst out fretfully after a long scrutiny. "Last time I saw you, you were deformed and had a hideous squint of some. What's happened to you?" "I bathed myself in one of the healing streams up there on the high places," said Grace and Glory quietly, "and all my deformities were washed away." "So that fellow took you to the high places after all, did he?" said the old lord, half incredulously and still staring at her. "Must have been a miraculous or magical sort of stream, judging by the effect on you." "Yes, all the streams up there have miraculous healing qualities," said she. "Those who bathe in them are perfectly healed and will never know death." "Never know death?" repeated he with a half sneer and a half groan. "What sort of water's that, eh?" "The same sort of water as that which healed my deformed feet and my crooked mouth," said she, still looking at him steadily and gently. "It is the water of life." "Mm," he said, with what he meant to be a sneering chuckle, but which sounded exactly like a sob. "If I'd known about such streams as those, I wouldn't be lying here now on what those fools of doctors think is my deathbed." "No," said Grace and Glory, "you would have passed through death already and be alive forevermore." The old man looked at her half covetously and half suspiciously. "Where do you learn that jargon, eh?" asked he. "And how do you know you will never die?" "You see, I have been to the kingdom of love," said she, "and I have died to the old loveless life which is death. And love has been planted in my heart and lives there. Love is eternal. The life that is love can never die. It is eternal life." The old man stared at her. At last he said, still jeeringly, "How did you say this eternal life, or whatever it is, was planted in you?" A lovely color came into her face. The shepherd, who is the Lord of life and love, planted it there. It is his life planted in me. As she mentioned the shepherd's name, her face shone with a beauty that the old man had never before seen. Shepherd, he echoed testily. What's he got to do with it? You know, it was he who took me to the high places, where everything happened to me. The shepherd, he growled again. A mere man, just like everyone else. A madman at that. How can he give life? A crazy fairy tale. He is the Lord of love, said she softly. The Lord and giver of life. That is why you are lying here now and dying, Sir Fearing, said she, looking at him with the strangest and most compassionate look he had ever seen. Don't you realize that you are dying because you don't know anything about love, which is the law of life? Love, the law of life, he muttered. What jargon is this? I'm dying because my body's old and worn out and won't work or even exist much longer. In spite of himself, he groaned in agony as he spoke, and then started up in bed and shaking with fear. Oh, no, said Grace and Glory, laying her hand on his, and some influence of peace seemed to quiet for a few moments his pangs of dread. Oh, no, your body is not the part which really dreads the dying. It is yourself, the tenant of the body, which is so fearful and afraid. You yourself, who must exist when your body no longer forms a temporary home for you or a means for your self expression and for contact with this familiar word, material world. He shivered from head to foot, then muttered, I'll not listen to any more fantastic fairy tales about the shepherd. You will have to meet him sometime, you know, said Grace and Glory gently. Never, cried the old man with a sudden burst of energy. Never. That so-called shepherd who I have disdained all my life. I mean after death, said Grace and Glory. You can evade him here in the valley all your lifetime, but not after death. He is the judge, you know. Judge! Cried the old man between a shriek and a groan. What judge? The judge of your whole life, of how you have lived and how you have used this body which was lent to you and the things you possessed here on earth. He will judge as to whether you have obeyed the law of love. How will the shepherd know about that? Sneered the old man. We're never met. He knows nothing about me. Will he judge from hearsay? And at that moment another look of terror spread over his face as he thought of the things which might be said about him by so many others. No, said she quietly, it is all written in you, by you yourself, Lord Fearing, written plainly for him to see, just as when an old tree is cut down, the whole history of its life is found written plainly in its heart in the rings formed during each separate year of its life. One who knows how to read it can understand at a glance about the years when it was buffeted by the great storms and could scarcely make any growth, and those years when it was diseased, and those when it went forward and became strong, or if the heart has been eaten away little by worms and grubs. It all becomes plain when the tree falls and is found to be hollow and dead. You have been inscribing your whole inner life yourself as plainly as possible, and he, the one whom you despise and reject, the Lord of life and love, is the judge who will have to read what is written in you and to pass sentence upon its worth or worthlessness. The old man groaned. "Mm, don't stand there telling me these horrible things," he gasped at last. "What's the good of saying all that now at the end of life?" "Why," exclaimed she earnestly, taking a step forward, "why, Lord Fearing, if you asked him, he would plant the seed of new life and love in your heart even now, and then it would grow and come to fruition in that other world. Then it won't matter at all about your body. What we are to receive new bodies which cannot die. Listen." And she sang these words: "An empty altar is each soul, whereon the eternal love would place a quenchless living coal from his own heart of love to burn and yearn back whence it came, to union with the parent flame. Yes, every soul a temple is, wherein love plans to dwell, and each must make its choice for this, to be a heaven or a hell. If empty left, hell is its plight, but heaven when God and man unite. Christ is the living purging flame, and thou the altar art. Forth from the love of God he came, and seeks thine empty heart. Receive this, Lord, from heaven above, in these to live his life of love." "Life of love," sneered the old man, and then groaned again. "Why do you keep harping on love?" "It is the law of the universe," said she, "the law of existence. Everything that loves lives forever. Everything else perishes." "What is love?" groaned he. "I know precious little about it." "You know nothing about it at all," said she compassionately. "To love is to give oneself, to lay down oneself, to share oneself with others, as the grass gives itself to the cattle, and the water to the thirsty land, and as the sun gives its light and warmth freely to good and bad alike." "Mm, sounds utterly detestable," said the poor self tormented old lord. "An existence of endless self giving? I couldn't bear it." His whole life flashed before him as he spoke, one long process of crafty, calculated grasping and getting from others, all the time taking and giving as little as possible. "If that's what your eternal life means, I don't want it. Better die and cease to be." "Then why are you so afraid to die?" asked she steadily. "I don't know," gasped he. "It's the horror of the thought of ceasing to be, becoming nothing, of losing everything and forever." The sweat broke out on his face. "Help me!" he gasped frenziedly. "Don't let me die! Hold me! Hold me! Don't torment me this way!" She grasped his groping, trembling hand in hers and said gently, "I will tell you why you are afraid to die. For once I was much afraid myself. You are afraid because deep down in your heart you know that you have broken the law of life, which is love, and that you will receive no forgiveness from the judge, because all your life long you have refused to forgive others, even your own son. And it is not extinction that you really fear, though that too would be a dreadful thing to contemplate. But yours is the far more terrible fear that it will not be extinction, that you will continue to exist in utterly different circumstances, lacking everything which shielded your life here and which you value. You are afraid because the judge you must meet at last is the one you have disdained and rejected all your life. Let me bring the shepherd to you now, she pleaded, and everything, yes, everything, can be changed before it is too late. No, 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 shrieked the old man. I won't see him, never. He flung himself up in the bed, crying aloud in terror and hate. Doors were opened, and nurses came running just as the old man fell back unconscious on the bed. That night, death came to old Lord Fearing as he lay in the great bed in the castle, and touching him with icy breath, whispered, Thou fool, this night is thy soul required of thee. And that is the end of chapter 9 of Mountains of Spices. And the death of old Lord Fearing. In the end, he rejected the plan of salvation, which is love. For you know God is love. Until next time, may the Lord bless you and keep you. May he make his face to shine upon you and be gracious to you. May the Lord lift up his countenance upon you and grant you his peace.